Chino, Slow, hello, Meridian, welcome, welcome. All right, so 11 o'clock, let's get started here. So first, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will be presenting So You Want to Be a CHRO, a panel discussion with Melissa Asher, CPS HR Practice Leader, Jacqueline Padilla, CPS HR Chief Human Resources Officer, CHRO, and Tamika Usher, Director of Administrator Services for the City of Rockland. Before we delve into this very enriching conversation today, just a little bit of housekeeping as usual. The session is being recorded so you can relive the valuable insights on this discussion today later on. The recording links will be provided in the chat at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned. For optimal sound quality, we kindly request that all attendees keep their microphones muted throughout this session. There will be designated times where you will be able to ask questions, but you may also type your questions into the Zoom chat. We'll make sure to address them as they come in or during those designated question times. Now, without further delay, I present to you our esteemed panelists, Melissa, Jacqueline, and Tamika. Take it away.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you, Jacqueline and Tamika, for joining us today. And everyone who is tuning in has taken some time away from your valuable schedules and your busy lives to join us. We hope this will be a valuable topic for you today. We're going to be very conversational. Our intent is to try to share some insights about what it is like to be a CHRO or HR director, get some lessons learned from our two amazing panelists here today. It's a good time to be thinking about this. If you're thinking about making a move, there are still lots of retirements happening. There are still a lot of movement within the HR world, and it is a very rewarding profession. It comes with lots and lots of exciting people, challenges, and opportunities. So I applaud you for wanting to learn a little bit more from our panelists today about what is this all about, and is this a path? Is this a journey that I'm ready for and that I want to take, and maybe get a few tips along the way about how your journey might take you to this ultimate end goal. So I do want to just quickly give a little bit more of information about our two panelists today, who I'm just so delighted were able to join us. I can't believe we were able to steal them away for an hour today. So let me just share a little bit about each of them, and then we'll get into our conversation. So first is Jacqueline Padilla, and Jacqueline has recently joined us here at CPS HR as our Chief Human Resources Officer. She has over 22 years, though, of experience in state government and 13 years of those in HR management. One of the things I think that I really love about Jacqueline is really her passion for making things better. She always wants to modernize what was happening. She's such a proponent of change and definitely does not espouse that, oh, we've always done it that way, and really challenges our thinking around these maybe our old practices or the old ways of doing things. So that has been a great driving force for us, and I know has been a theme throughout your career, Jacqueline. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Also, we have, oh, my slides are just, there we go. Tamika Usher. And Tamika has also a long history of work in the HR field. She is currently actually the Director of Administrative Services, which is a newer role, because she started as Director of HR and they said, oh my goodness, Tamika, we need you to do all of these other things too. So quickly moved into this role as Director of Administrative Services. Formerly, she was the Director of Human Resources for El Dorado County. But as I said, 2 decades of experience in HR, private sector, as well as public sector, but definitely with a focus in the public sector in all of the different facets and areas that entails. So welcome, Jacqueline and Padilla. Again, so Jacqueline and Tamika, so glad that you're able to join us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of structure, and then we're going to get rid of the slides and get into the conversation here today. So for our discussion, we do have some prepared questions. So we will be going through those and just sharing insights based on those. We also will be welcoming questions from the audience though. So I encourage you in the chat, if a question occurs to you, if there's a question you want to ask Jacqueline or Padilla or throw out to all of us, I want you to please put that in the chat because we will be having time. We will be looking for those questions and making space to answer those during our time here today. And then we will have one question that is really more about some advice to send you out on the rest of your day today. So that's our plan at a high level. And now I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we will get to hear directly from our panelists. So I thought it would be interesting to start out and just learn a little bit more about each of you, Tamika and Jacqueline, and your path to your role, to your leadership role. So maybe Tamika, if you want to start, what was your path to becoming an HR director and now really director of administrative services?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And so my journey started in a more traditional way. Like many of you, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do in terms of getting my advanced degree, but just fell into human resources. But truthfully, this is the only job I've ever had in a HR type of environment. So I started out working for the federal government, for the Department of Interior in human resources. I then transitioned to public sector while I was going through grad school, and then had the opportunity to transition to becoming a consultant. And so I actually worked in a variety of capacities for CPS HR services for about 12 years as a consultant, which really expanded my reach and exposure to working with a variety of diverse public agencies of all different sizes across the country. And so that kind of opened my eyes to what the possibilities were in HR, kind of stepping into your spaces, public and private agencies, providing consultant support. Despite my age, I'm still figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. But I said, you know what? I want to really understand what it's like to be a public servant in a city, county, municipality. And so I transitioned from senior level consultant to my first entry was I had the opportunity to be the HR director of El Dorado County, which was really eye-opening, really exposed me to a wide variety of things, and then have just transitioned to my current role from there. So I literally started at the bottom of being an intern in human resources, and with being able to take risks and opportunities, as well as my education, landed me to the seat I sit in now.
Wow, fantastic.
Thank you.
Great journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me too. So my path to CHRO, I would say, is a little less traditional. I started with Department of Corrections, so the state of California, right out of high school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that people go to college, and I'm from a really small town. I'm not sure if anyone knows where Imperial, California is. It's about 10 minutes from the border of Mexico, and about 120 degrees right now. So all you ever wanted to do when you got out of high school was move out of that place. But I didn't. I was able to, I got on with the state of California, and I come from a family history of public servants. And so it's pretty much kind of what I feel like I knew. The great thing about the state of California at Department of Corrections or any other agency is there's so many choices. It's a great place to come into and really just figure out what you want to do. And so I say that I just kind of happened into HR because I did kind of happen into HR. I started in accounting, realized I was not an accountant, moved on rather quickly, got into contracts, business services. I did end up moving out of Imperial, and I worked throughout my career with corrections at 5 prisons, institutions, state institutions, and also headquarters. I joined headquarters with Department of Corrections and was asked if I was interested in joining this confidential special project. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And it had to do with all of their staffing allocations, their classifications. It really dove me into the human resources world. And I got the opportunity to travel up and down the state, reviewing staffing packages, recommending different staffing packages. But what I realized the most out of that I loved about HR was that human connection, that meeting people and really hearing about their journeys and helping them out. And so that's where it started. And then from there, it just, it grew. Other opportunities would come forward, or volunteer type assignments. And I was the first to want to take them. And I happened into a management role and left corrections and went to Covered California, which is a polar opposite department, and learned so many other great things from there. And then finally ending my state career as the deputy director of HR at CDCR. So it was a great full circle moment for me too, to end my state career back where I started. But overall, it was really the love of the work and the people that brought me here.
I love it. I hear that so often when people talk about any of their work in HR. We happened into HR, right? It's such a common theme. Like people maybe are dabbling in it, or maybe someone sees some people skills in them and says, hey, we really need you, in this HR department. Would you come and join us over here? And then, as both of you have just said, then opportunities really abound if you're interested in that, if you're attuned to it, and you can really progress. So thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if there are some things on that path that you can look back on and attribute to your success in being able to not only navigate, those opportunities as they came along, but to really be successful in this role. What do you think has led to your success? And Jacqueline, maybe we'll just pick it up with you.
Okay. When I look back over my career, I would say, like I mentioned earlier, really taking those opportunities to learn something new and different. It may be scary. It may not be something you get paid for, but it's an opportunity to learn something new. I would also say having some really great mentors over the years, and really leaning on those mentors of mine to help coach me through my, journey through the ranks, and then also with, HR, and having some great leadership that I really felt comfortable in that environment. I felt like I could fail to succeed. I didn't feel like I was in a negative, I got you type situation. And I really feel lucky to have been put in those positions throughout the years. And so I would say that's really attributed to the success that I've had.
That's great. Tamika, what would you say?
Yeah, this is interesting because Jacqueline and I literally just met 15 minutes before we started this, but she said some things that I'm going to ditto. I use the term fail forward, and I didn't initially become comfortable with that term because of failure has such a negative connotation. But I learned to embrace failing forward from the perspective of, I think my success attributes to my capacity to always want to learn, to always want to strive for more, to always want to be curious and seek out opportunities. Some opportunities that, frankly, some of my peers at that point, as I look back, felt that they were beneath them, or those opportunities were demeaning. But everything we do, of course, human resources is about people, right? It's about the most, in my opinion, the most valuable resource that we all support, and that's our people. But what I learned very quickly is relationships are critical to success, especially if you want to be a department head in HR or any area. And so my capacity to always want to learn, to always striving, never settling for complacency, has really led to my success, because it helped me develop relationships. Some people didn't even know that I had a relationship with them. I've had mentors, I've had formal coaches, I've had informal coaches and mentors that I would just see things in people or watch things, and I would say, I'm going to steal that and put that in my toolbox, and I'm going to make it mine so it's authentic. But I need to wear that because I saw some competencies, some approaches, some ways that people handle things that attributed to me being here, but I'm not done yet. And so that capacity to thrive and learn doesn't stop when you get in the seat, right? You have to keep moving forward. And I think that has allowed me to step into situations that, if I'm completely honest, I do suffer from imposter syndrome, that I don't know that I was completely ready to sit in that seat, but I was up for the challenge, and people saw things in me and said, she's ready. And with her capacity to want to learn, I was able to be successful.
That's great. I'm hearing some themes across both. I mean, this relationship building, whether it's that, you know, with the people you're working with, or maybe mentors, the need and drive for continuous improvement and continuous learning, like lifelong learners, I think we're talking with here.
Melissa,
and a little, yeah.
I'd actually like to add something.
Please.
I thought it was great that, Tamika, that you said imposter syndrome. And I think that is being transparent, that's being vulnerable. And I would say that that's contributed to my success. Definitely not perfect, made mistakes along the way, which is okay, you learn from it. But I think really showing that I'm a human too, especially when you go into the leadership roles and supervisory roles. And it's really connecting with your employees and showing them that you are human too. You can have stress. You know, I always used to joke with, and even Melissa, I probably said it years ago in some training that we've, kind of done together, is people think I love to train, but I get nervous as heck and my eyebrows sweat. So I usually start every training with saying that, because I feel like then people can relate to me. And I've had those leaders over the years that have that stone wall that they don't really connect, because I'm supervisor, I'm your director, and you're, my employee, and bridging that. And I think that goes with the culture and what how we have future things on inclusivity, but I think that having that mentality has also played into my success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. All right. Well, we're off to a great start here. I think we've learned a lot about the two of you. So thank you for being willing to share that with our audience. So thinking about who's listening today, and that these folks are interested in pursuing this career path, I'm wondering what competencies or skills you think someone should either possess, or they should grow, or they should be pursuing. So to step into this role, what skills and competencies do you think people should maybe focus on? And whoever would like to start can just jump in.
I would pick up on the ability to be vulnerable. And that's challenging, because I am not a very vulnerable person in my personal or professional life. But as a leader, I've learned to get comfortable in showing that vulnerability, and not so much that robot or that rigid type A personality, because that it prevents you from making connections and developing relationships and people. But doing it in a space that's comfortable for me. And so I never advocate that people be fake. I think people should be authentic to who they are. I think as a leader, you have to be authentic to who you are, but you also have to be open to growing and evolving, because being an effective leader is not about forcing people, whether they're your subordinates or your peers, to meet you where you are. There's a space where you all have to meet in the middle, and you have to lean into that as you advance in a leadership capacity. Other things that come to mind that I think is underrated is that visionary aspect. I think to be an effective leader, to be a director of human resources or chief people officer, whatever titles are being used, you have to be able to see and operate beyond what's in front of you. You have to be a strategic thinker. You have to be visionary. I actually am stealing this term from Melissa, and I use it all the time. And we were talking about something years ago about a project that we were working on together. And she said, you know, that how might we? And everything I do, I approach it from a how might we perspective. I think to be a successful leader in the path of a director is you have to have that strategic thinking element. And I don't even call it think outside the box anymore, because that implies there is a box. I think it's that how might we approach this and move forward? And that's a strong asset and skill set that you have to nurture. If you don't already have it, you have to nurture. I don't have all the competencies that I need to be an effective leader. I'm just committed to continue to work on them. That's what separates me from one leader from the other. I'm not complacent in areas that may be deficient for me. I'm willing to take a chance and work on it for the betterment of adding more tools to my toolbox. And then I think the last two that I'll say before I turn over to Jacqueline is, I think people don't put enough emphasis on the political and business acumen that you have to be successful. It is absolutely critical that you have those competencies, that you have those soft skills to show up in those spaces, not only in those political environments. And as I listen to the agencies that Marissa said were represented in the locations, all of you have different levels of political environments. And so being able to show up in those and have that business acumen is what is going to help separate you from your peers when you're talking about being a competitive candidate and being a director. Now, I didn't say the technical piece because I'm just assuming that that's a given, but certainly you have to have a technical competence in something.
It's interesting that you said the political acumen and being able to adjust when needed, because a couple of things that I wrote down was the ability to adapt and pivot. And that comes with situations or scenarios that come your way, because those of us in the room that are in HR, you know, every day is a different day. You always have something new that's coming your way. But it's also being able to adapt and pivot based on your audience, based on the folks that you're working with, based on the folks that you're developing, because it's not a one size fits all anymore in our work environment. You really have to understand the needs of, especially your employees, your customers. So adapt and pivot is top of mind for me to add on. Also, be collaborative. Nobody wants that strong director walking in the door and dictating and telling what we're going to do. I mean, I would think I could say that safely. So being vulnerable and being real that you don't know everything, and that's okay. Ask for feedback, be collaborative, create new things, new processes, new technology together, and bring people together. Let's see, another, I would say, I think maybe you mentioned it to me, Tamika, but being able to look at the big picture, especially moving into the CHRO role. You're now not a subject matter expert in this, discipline you were in HR. It's now having to look at the entire organization, the political community, and how what you do and the decisions you make will impact. Even though it seems like it's one isolated situation, it could be a snowball effect. And so the ability to have that vision, that forward thinking that Tamika talked about, I think those are like the top of mind right now. I'm sure we'll throw some more out later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the mix. I mean, as Tamika said, there's certainly the technical skills. I mean, you get that, in your work world as you're working your way up. But I'm hearing in this role, really a focus on maybe more of those competencies around political acumen, around collaborating with others, change management, bringing people together. I mean, it really is bringing both the technical and those, sometimes they call them softer skills, together.
Yeah. And Melissa, I would add, some agencies are small. And so the director of HR, the chief HR officer is relying on their technical skills more so than you are in a medium to large agency, but it's foundational. You have to have them. It's just the way in which some of us have to execute them more than others because of the role, but it's foundational that as you lift to that space, you need those soft skills much more effectively than you need those technical skills.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Well, we have one question that's been already put into the chat. I think I'm going to insert that in here. And then please, any other questions everybody has, please feel free to throw them in. But this is an interesting question. It's already got a thumbs up too. So a couple of people are interested in this, and it's around accomplishments in reorganization structures. So Cordell, who's asked this, you're talking about in terms of being involved with org restructures? If you want to come off of mute or put it in the chat.
Yes, yes. Can you hear my voice, Melissa?
Yes, I sure can.
Yes. I should have phrased it differently. I said, "What can you?" The question to the panel is, can you share some of your accomplishments? You know, as in work reorganization structure.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So I think some of the key elements to being successful, especially in an org restructure, is taking your time to be thoughtful about what you're doing. So not just moving things and putting things in place because they seem to be fitting in those areas. Really dive in and really understand the cause and effect, I would say, of what you're doing. I can give an example. When I joined Covered California, the HR department was 34 employees, a $3 million budget, but over 5 years and creating a mechanism to document the data, having data tell the story. There was a real need over 5 years that it grew up to 53 employees and almost $12 million. So I think that really diving into the data, letting the data tell the story can help drive the success of a reorganization. And then communicating wise, so getting feedback, the collaboration piece, get more involved, get people involved. So that way you're making a thoughtful decision.
Tamika, anything you'd like to share or add on this topic?
I think it goes back to the relationship. That organizational aspect is my favorite part of HR, frankly, because it allows me to be creative. It allows me to use those consulting skills that I nurtured when I was actually a consultant by label. But I would encourage you all to be internal consultants in your respective organizations because you can be. But it allows me to create that puzzle, right? And it allows you to really show up and show your customers how you can be a business partner and how you can collaborate, because there's an opportunity when you're working on any reorganization where they're not only reaching out to you for your technical skill set in whatever functional area of HR you need to use, but here's an opportunity for you to learn more about your customer, your client, right? And the more you know about your customer or client, the better you can serve them. That's a fact. So you can step into those spaces and do that. And so all of the successful engagements that I've approached it from yes, I have something to offer. I'm not a pair of hands. I'm bringing something to the table, but there is also something that I can learn. And it's the curiosity in the learning that really made those engagements successful, because it allowed my customer or client to see that I was intrigued about what they had to offer and was willing to learn. And so asking those what, why, when type of questions, because it increases the depth of your knowledge and what you can bring to the table to help solve the problem. Because HR, we're here to solve problems, but we don't want to solve problems in a vacuum. We have to solve problems from a collaborative approach. And so all of my successful engagements, the feedback has always been, Tamika, we felt like you were part of the team. Tamika, when towards the end, you talked about this project as if it was your project, as if this was your passion project. You didn't say, well, what do you guys need? You said, what do we need? Well, I did that because I'm a part of the organization as well, and their success is my success. And so ingraining yourself in the project to where you create an equal partnership of contribution and learning, I think has served me very well in no matter what type of project I approach.
Tamika, I think that you might agree with me too on this, is that understanding that you may not get it perfect to start. And so always creating that feedback loop and continuous improvement is also very beneficial, because like I said, we want perfection probably on the onset, but understanding that it may not be. And so there's things that may need to change after, but just creating that place for the feedback.
Yes, I don't always love feedback, especially if it's constructive, right? You know, we all have egos, but I am passionate about the power of feedback, because that's how we learn. That's how we get information to make those course corrections, or to say, Tamika, you're doing great. And it's very specific and direct and objective and timely. And so you need feedback. And if you're not comfortable with feedback, there's another area of opportunity for you, because you're going to want that feedback in any reorganization project, because there's some things, hindsight is 2020, right? There's some things that you didn't know. You can only provide the best suggestions based on the information you have right now.
Great, great. Gosh, thank you. And Cordell, thank you for that question. We're going to kind of stay on this path of kind of talking through like the skills and competencies. I love this theme here. And I think one of the areas that I get asked about a lot when people are interested in going this direction is employee relations. And either they're kind of running towards that or they're running away from that. So how important is employee relations and, you know, union maybe experience for the role? And maybe if someone doesn't have much of that experience, like what should they do?
I'll start this one. I'm going to separate employee relations from labor relations. And labor relations would be the union environment. Some of you have more unions in your states than others. That's an area that I tend to want to run away from. That is not an area of strength for me, even though I have always had responsibility for labor relations. And so I've gone through certifications, I take classes, I partner with people who are smarter than me to learn, and I'm still in a very much learning capacity. Why isn't it an area that I love, that I would want to run for, is because it doesn't align with who I naturally am. I naturally am a straight shooter. I naturally am, tell me the problem, I'll try to solve it. And here's what I got to offer. What do you have to offer? And in labor relations, doesn't always work like that. And so what I've grown into is, I value labor relations every day in terms of how we support our employees. I believe it happens every day. It doesn't just happen during the negotiation space. And I think if you learn and grow some of the competencies that Jacqueline and I have talked about, despite the technical pieces of labor relations, the DILS Act, the MMBA, whatever act you're under in terms of your labor organizations, the relationship piece is important. And so I've been successful despite my technical deficiencies because I have good relationship and collaboration skills. Now, let me pivot. Employee relations, I love it. And I think it's all about relationships. It's all about connections. It's all about you being able to show up and support your organization, even though things happen in your departments, as you all know, and you're like, what happened? But you being able to get there and be an objective, thoughtful person that has great active listening skills. And when I say great active listening skills, I don't just mean hearing. I mean paying attention to what's not being said. I mean, paying attention to those nonverbals, paying attention to how the energy shifts in the room when either an individual walks in or an individual starts to speak. All of those things are important. And so in HR, we have to be on all the time because there's things that are said and that are not said that will influence the conversation, will influence the decision, will influence how you can show up and support the process or the problem, whatever strategic thing you're trying to work in. And so I think both of those are important. Some of you are in spaces where you're generalists, some of you in spaces where you're specialists, but whatever you are in HR at this point, as you move to a manager and certainly a director, you have to have your hands in all of that and really lean into those collaboration and relationship building skills and building the relationship, but maintaining the relationship. Jacqueline?
I agree with you 100% on all of that. It's interesting that you said you're a straight shooter because I've been told what you see is what you get. So labor relations, like Tamika said, is not the most, fun area for me because there is that, behind the curtain type relationship in some aspects, but you can overcome that with it's actually a lot of the competencies we've already talked about, being collaborative, being able to adapt. To me, it's really about the relationship. With the Department of Corrections, upwards of 22 unions in the whole entire organization. So it was constantly, and each one is different. So you've got to have the ability to pivot and adapt and build those relationships. So I don't have a whole lot to add there because you kind of took the words right out of my mouth too, but employee relations too is one of my favorite areas. It's again, not a one size fits all. Again, yeah, like you said, listen to the nonverbal cues, especially. But I love that area too, because it's about development. It's about feedback. It's about coaching employees in whatever aspect it is, their career, some personal things they may have going on, some support they need. And so, so to answer the second part of that, how you could learn that in an environment where it's not prevalent or you don't have it is to partner, get if you don't have a buddy program or you don't have an internship type program or like a position swap program, ask for something, ask to spend some time out of your week, your day, or your month to job shadow, to learn, join some of the communities out there that with other leaders or other like-minded folks that do have the experience, a mentor, so you can learn about those two areas.
Great. Thank you for sharing that insight. That's always an area that comes up. Perfect. Well, and I want to pull on something that you mentioned earlier, Jacqueline, around, I think, our current environment, around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're kind of starting to touch on that. I think that is a really important topic today, and I think it has really impacted HR. It's impacted everyone, but I mean, HR is very often taking a leading role there. So I'd like to get both of your perspective on how the growing emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion in our world, how is that impacting the role, the CHRO role?
Impacting the role. I think it's, gosh, I don't know how to say it, like about impacting the role, but it's more so the awareness. You have to have the ability to have crucial conversations with people. There's a lot that's being talked about that may not be comfortable. And so being able to be comfortable in the uncomfortable environment. So in this role, it's also pushing your leadership to see the benefit and the value, and how it starts with the culture of the organization. It starts with the leader of the organization. And so, prior to the pandemic, because the pandemic and some other events, kind of spearheaded this or pushed it forward. But prior to that, in my experience, they were kind of initiatives. It was, okay, you want us to, be more inclusive in our hiring processes, or, the equitable salary pay. It was something that was not really supported or as much looked at in some of my experience as it is now. Tamika, do you have anything to add there?
Yes. Yeah. So my first thought when I was listening to Melissa was, it depends.
Yeah.
And I like that word. And really, I was thinking it depends because we all work for some organizations who have embraced DEIB in a real cultural changing way. And some of us are still in the space of ignoring, and some of us are in the space of we've jumped on the train, but we're really being a little lackadaisical with what do these words really mean, and moving towards changing our culture. I would say from a purist perspective, it shouldn't have impacted us at all, because HR fundamentally should have always been about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It just didn't have the spotlight on it. And it was called, EEO, affirmative action, and some other more data-driven things without any substance in terms of program and strategic culture change. Now we are, not putting so much emphasis on the data, but putting more emphasis on sustainable cultural changes in terms of our identity. And for me, it depends, because obviously it depends on what organizations you work in. Some of us work in organizations where they've embraced it and they've changed their culture, and it's a part of their identity and who they are, and they won't be going back. And some of us work in organizations where we have to walk on eggshells to even talk about that. And there's a lot of ignorance, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say this, around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is not a black and white thing. It's much more than that, but it has this stigmatism that is so limiting to the potential. So the impact is there. The impact should be there. And I've seen it move us from a more transactional lens to a very programmatic and strategic lens in terms of HR at the forefront of creating programs and culture and engaging. And really, when you think about that change spectrum, really on that change spectrum to say how we approach things, not only from a transactional space, but how we market, how we brand ourselves, how we treat each other. And so in some organizations, I know enough to say it's here to stay. In others, I think we're already seeing the pendulum change from that not being the priority in terms of who our organization are, which is disappointing to me, because everyone wants to be in an inclusive environment, no matter what groups you associate with, right? And so there's a lot of space there, but it really unfortunately depends on the organization, the part of the country that you're in, and your leadership, not director, your leadership at the top of your city or your county, because that's where the initiatives really start. That city council, that board of supervisors, the board of directors, they really set the tone.
Yeah, I also think too, it's a personal, like as the CHRO, HR director, it also is a personal journey. I think like it is for anybody else, because you are on and leading a lot of the initiatives and you are speaking to them. And so really at your core too, is that what your belief is? Because if it's not going to change the culture, like you said, Tamika, as far as the head, the boards really driving that, I like to say almost expectation that this is the culture we're going to have.
Yeah. But the bottom line is every new initiative equals more work for HR at every level. Yes. So truthfully, that is how it's impacted our role, because it's the more we have these initiatives and these programs, and I'm not saying they're not good. It's just, okay, so how are we going to get that done as well? That's the bottom line.
Yeah. It's thank God for the applicant tracking systems and for some of these computer systems that we use now that hopefully alleviate some of the transactional work. It doesn't take it away, but alleviates that, because this space where, like you were saying, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's not a one and done. It's systematic. How do we embed this across, the culture across the organization is a much different question and a much bigger lift. So thank you for speaking into that. We have a couple more questions that have come in. I want to try to make sure we get those. Let me throw this one out there. This is kind of an interesting one from Edward. There's a little bit of a precursor to it, but kind of the gist of it is that HR leaders can often be approached to kind of cover an administrative leader. It's like a little bit maybe after the fact, instead of maybe those leaders seeking guidance in a more proactive manner. So the question with that context is, what advice or experience do you have, or what advice do you have for an HR leader trying to provide protections for an organization who kind of struggles with this type of maybe administrators or managers who aren't on the proactive side of things?
This is challenging, because I could read that chat in a variety of different ways, from something very egregious to something that, please don't do that again. But I'll share this. When I stepped into my role in my current employer, one of the department directors said, well, I really don't think we need HR. And this was after me giving a presentation of, in 30 days, I did an assessment of what I saw in HR and what I saw in the organization, and presented that assessment to the executive team. And this was just 30 days. Here's what I think is wrong. And then so this was the response. And literally 90 days later, that same individual was presenting me with a Starbucks gift card at an executive meeting, giving an apology. And I didn't take offense to the feeling that we don't need HR. We know our business, we know what to do. And let's be honest, a lot of your customers see you all as very transactional. And let's be further honest, that's because some of you show up that way. You don't show up as a business partner and being collaborative. And so I just took it as a challenge to say, well, let me show you what I can do, because I'd already done an assessment. I knew what was happening. I just needed time. And so, as you're referring to, Edward, some things happen in this particular department that were egregious and weren't the director's fault, but it became clear that the director should have known what was happening. And so I didn't need to go in there and say, I told you so. I went in there and said, here's how I can help you. Here's how I can support you. And let's get through this. And then here's how I can coach you to make things better. The outcome of the storm was me being invited to facilitate a session with the entire department to just say, what's happening? Let's collect some data about how we can change this organization. And so there are some times where, yes, HR, we are part of management. We represent management in the organizations. That's a fact. But there are some of our customers and clients are supportive of that covering, and some go rogue. And sometimes we can help fix it, and sometimes it's even above us. And so, Edward, you talk about getting attorneys involved and seeking counsel. Sometimes, yeah, that has to happen as well. But I think you showing what HR is supposed to be, even if your HR department isn't that now, you showing in a space of educating, of how we're here to support. We are here to support our customers, and our customers are multifaceted. And how we can support them, support their departments, I think you go a long way. And some of my customers and clients have still remained to be rogue as I've worked in different organizations. And some of them have come to quickly learn the value of aligning with HR and at least seeking recommendation and counsel before you go jump off the bridge. And now we have to fix it, but we can't ignore it. We're always going to have those customers and clients who are going to jump off the bridge and say, okay, we jumped, now can you save us? And we have to show up in that space and be fair as well.
Yeah. Jacqueline, anything you want to add? We have lots of questions coming in.
Yeah,
so
no, I think Tamika covered it very well. So we have a lot of questions in the time, so we can go ahead and thank you, Tamika.
Well, maybe we'll let you take the first crack at this one, Jacqueline. This is that echoed, Jane asked it, but Laura says, yes, tell me more. So someone who is heading up an HR department of one, right? And we talked about how that can happen in these small organizations. You're doing it all. You're basically doing it all. And the question is, what is your advice on how you balance strategy and day-to-day operations? How do you balance, you're doing it all, basically?
Okay, well, Jane, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So I will tell you just my experience. So I came from Department of Corrections, where I had about 1,000 HR employees, 275 just in my headquarters office. So now to an office of 4. And it has been a major adjustment for me. It has been shifting from really just leading, developing, having that vision and communicating that, also the strategy of where we're going to go or roadmap, to I'm doing it. I'm in the trenches now. I'm also trying to balance the strategy. And I think it's just, to me, it's really that I have to manage my time. So I manage my time, and I spend certain times of my day, or even a week, month, to really focus on, here's where I want to go now that I've been here a while and I've assessed. But then also really diving into the processes, processing some things, being, basically a working manager kind of thing, which in my role that I've recently, or that I passed at, it's actually been really, really nice. It's gotten me back to why I love HR so much. So I think that for me, it's balancing myself. the organization's been great that I work for in giving me that latitude or freedom to spend time with the work and then spend time with the strategy with the, with other leaders. So Tamika,
I would say you are not alone at all. And some tangible things, you may not have the resources within your organization to get new HR staff. And so figure out how to leverage consultants, large ones, small ones that can have niche in certain areas that can help you. Make relationships. We are not successful if we don't leverage relationships with other entities that are similar size, that are in our geographic or outside our geographic area. You need to develop relationships with organizations who are doing it well and borrow from them. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and create everything, because you don't have time to do that. So new policies, new programs, new initiatives coming out that you all want to create in your organization, reach out and ask. Other agencies have already created what you're trying to create. Reach out and ask them for samples, join associations. When you go to conferences, be an active participant in developing relationships, because you're not alone. There are a ton of HR directors, managers, practitioners who are one stop or very small shop. Like Jacqueline, I came from accounting. I had 21 FTEs in HR. And I came to an HR department that only had 4. I'm absolutely a working HR director. And many of us have to do that. And so you have to find ways to leverage relationships. I have a lot of relationships. I will pick up the phone and say, hey, I need to create this policy. Do you have something? And I just borrow from people who do it well. Don't borrow from people who don't do it well, because you're going to have to do a lot of work. I borrow from people who do it well, because then you can throw your logo on there, make some tweaks to align to your organization, and you look like you are knocking it out of the ballpark with an HR party of one. And so you have to learn to leverage those relationships to get what you need, because if you don't have money for consultants, look maybe at interns. Line yourself with colleges that have internship programs that they need. They have HR master or bachelor's degree programs. Maybe you can get some support there, because you have to find spaces to think strategically, but it is exhausting. And while you're trying to do the required legal transactional things, you have to be strategic, but you also have to find work-life balance. And I don't have an answer for you. I can just tell you things that I've done, because I live that world every day.
Yeah. You're a good company, and develop your network, right? Develop and utilize that network. And so this next question maybe leads us along that path a little bit, because I'm wondering, like, how do you stay current? Are there some go-to resources that you all would recommend for the ever-changing HR landscape, or any particular education or certifications that you might suggest?
I think it goes back to what Tamika just said. It's that relationship, or the relationships you've built over your career. There's so many times that I reach out to folks that worked for me at the different agencies, and I'm like, hey, remember that thing we did? Or, hey, you talked about this. Getting involved in, an HR organization with the state of California, it was great, because we had like statewide HR ad hoc groups. So I'm getting involved in that. And then, but when you are a party of one, sometimes you don't have the money to join memberships and certifications. But I'm always a proponent of SHRM and all of the great things that they have as tools that you can take away, so you're not reinventing the wheel. I saw there was a comment about ChatGPT. ChatGPT has kind of been a game changer for some of the things that we've been doing recently, and it takes a lot of the work out of creating something from the ground up.
Great. Tamika, your thoughts on ways,
resources? I would say, if you have limited financial resources, maybe stay away from the big SHRMs. They're going to be expensive, right? But look at the more local level associations and groups that you can connect through to develop those relationships. Pick those conferences that align with the biggest need that you have. But you got to be an active participant to be able to develop the relationships. Those of you, when you're going to training classes, there's a lot of different HR training classes. Make connections with the participants. That's an easy and relatively inexpensive way to start developing relationships and being able to be a support system to each other. Certifications are great, but it depends on how you plan on using them. If you just want them to have letters behind your name, well, that's great, but it may not be as impactful than what you're looking for to really make a difference in your organization. So you have to decide kind of what path are you on, and how those things are going to contribute to your environment where you're at, or if you're really doing these things to prepare for the next level. And I'm not judging, you just have to know what path you are going down to be able to do things that are going to be the most effective for your time.
Yeah, great. Okay, all right. Well, speaking of time, we are rapidly running out of time here. There's definitely a question I want to end on. Maybe quickly, though, before we get to that, there was a question about, we talked a lot about relationships, and one of our participants, Megan, loves building relationships as part of HR. But there is a little bit of that dichotomy, because if you're doing employee relations or maybe investigations, there is a neutrality, you have to maintain. So how do you kind of balance that, the need for this neutrality, this, for discipline or what have you, but building a relationship?
I would say it depends on what it is. When you're doing an investigation, when you're doing a disciplinary process, when you are actively in negotiations, your relationship and building takes a slight back seat, because you do have to remain neutral, but those things don't last forever. And so you can still develop relationships and have the spirit of being a collaborator when you're in negotiation. You just know that there's certain hard rules. But once you step outside of those events, which an investigation is an event, it's going to start, it's going to end, right? You can step back into that relationship building space, because both parties know you have a role to do in that particular event. You just don't have to live in that space throughout, the entire year. That's how I would answer that.
Nice.
Yeah, I would answer it very similar. I think what first came to mind was be true to yourself outside of the, you have a role and there's rules and we know the rights and wrongs usually, in HR, I say usually there's, but be true to who you are. I can give an example of, back in the early days of management, an upset employee, and it's probably a good scenario for a lot of folks, files some sort of a claim. And for a while I struggled with trying to change who my personality was. Do I distance myself? Do I not be as personable? Do I not be who I am? And, someone that I really respect and as a mentor is like, no, be true to who you are. Don't stop doing the things that you do to connect with other people because of one person that is upset about something. And so I really, that hit home to me. And so I really always try to think of that.
Perfect. Okay. Last couple of minutes here. What advice, and we'll have to keep it short, but I'd love to hear from each of you. What advice do you have for those listening who are aspiring to be a CHRO? What's your top tip?
Did you want to go, Tamika?
It's hard to distill it, I know.
Be ready. Be ready. And you got to keep your seatbelt on. It's not, being a director of human resources in any capacity is not for the weak. It's challenging in so many ways. And so make sure you do your homework and prepare yourself to step into that seat, because it is certainly different than the seats of an analyst, of a principal, of even an HR manager. That's how I would say it quickly.
Yeah, I would say it is challenging. It's rewarding. So it's before I get to the challenging, it's very rewarding, especially when you see and can grow, develop employees and have an impact on people's lives. So it's very rewarding in that aspect. But it also can be very challenging. But if you go into every situation that may be challenging as a learning opportunity, and you're only going to get stronger, you're only going to get better because of these challenging times or situations, I feel like you'll be successful. And also have confidence and don't be afraid. You're on the cusp, you're ready to take that next level. Tell yourself you can do it and do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Hopefully you'll have somebody that will help develop you and reach out to your network. There's a great group of people in this room right now. Reach out to your network if you're struggling. We've all been there. Remember, you're human. We've all been there.
And Melissa, let me add, get a mentor. If you want to make that transition, you need probably a couple of mentors in different capacities, so you can lean in and get guidance and advice that will serve you well.
Great, great advice. Oh my goodness. Well, I feel like we could talk all day long, and what a great compliment. Jacqueline and Tamika, you have both been sharing lots of different stories, different perspectives, a lot of commonality. So I just want to thank you both so much for being a part of our presentation today. I mean, you basically have given, I think, a lot of insights for someone who's thinking about this role, maybe thinking about it for tomorrow, maybe thinking about it down the road. There's so many things that they can do now to prepare, and the insights that you've shared in terms of your paths, the things that have led to your success and the different skills and competencies have just really been inspiring today. I can't thank you enough for your time and your wisdom, and thank you to everyone for the questions, for the engagement today. Really, it's been a great session. Thank you so much.
And Melissa, can I add, I'm not an active LinkedIn user, but those of you that have questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, because it has been a journey, and it will continue to be a journey as long as we're in HR, because HR is so dynamic. So if you have something, find me on LinkedIn, you reach out to ask the question. I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah, same for me. LinkedIn is like my main social media network. I'm always on there. So yeah, reach out anytime.
I love it. Someone put in the chat, you ladies are awesome, and I want to grow up to be just like you.
Yes.
Great, great. Well, we'll stick around for a minute or two here, but
Absolutely.
Marissa, I know we have to probably close out. I think we were able to answer, well, almost all of the questions in the channel, and the recording is going to be available for everyone.
Later this afternoon, it will be uploaded to the link provided in the chat.
There was a question I saw earlier, and because I think it's a great question for both Tamika and I, and it was around education. And do you feel like that is impactful? I have to go back to read it exactly, but is there emphasis on education within these roles? I thought that was a great question, and I can answer for myself. So like I said, I came up to this role through like kind of a non-traditional way. I started college, and I wasn't always the best student. It was something that came very, very hard for me growing up. And so that was the last thing I really wanted to do. And really my mom said, get a job with the state or go to college. You need to pick something, you know, and but I would say early on in my career, and especially as I've gotten into leadership management roles, I think education was looked on a bit differently back then. It's been a long time. People used education to screen people out of a potential job, right? But there's such a shift now with equality and bringing in diversity that I haven't seen so much as that degree having an impact on my job. But what I will say is, if you go into a situation willing to learn, if your job wants you to learn and that will give you those opportunities, then take them. Because I did have the opportunity to not go back to full-on college yet, but I did get the opportunity with one of my organizations to do some certification programs, and it was very fruitful. It was very great opportunity for me to do. So that's my perspective on that question.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think that will do it for us today. Again, thank you everyone so much for participating, and really special thanks to Jacqueline and Tamika for spending your time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Best of luck to you all.